Quick reminder to keep using the app if you have questions, and we'll get to them at the end. But now it's my pleasure to introduce a recorded presentation from Leeanne Morris, a UK psychotherapist who's just published a paper on the mental harms of male circumcision. So if we can get that up, we'll watch that now.
My name is Leeanne Morris. I'm a UK psychotherapeutic counsellor and researcher, and today I'll be sharing findings from my qualitative study on a topic that is rarely addressed, yet deeply felt by those affected: the long-term mental health impact of non-therapeutic childhood penile circumcision. Grief is a universal human experience, but not all grief is treated equally. There are men living with deep, unresolved emotional pain from a procedure performed without their consent, a procedure often framed as benign, beneficial, or culturally significant. But for these men, it marked a rupture in their bodily autonomy and a wound in their identity. This is a form of disenfranchised grief, grief that is unacknowledged, invalidated, and silenced. This study was born out of what I perceive to be an ethical and clinical blind spot. Mental health practitioners are rarely trained to see non-consensual circumcision as a potential source of trauma. And yet I was hearing stories of distress, anger, betrayal of men whose pain had no social mirror. I wanted to understand these experiences more deeply and bring them into the therapeutic conversation. So I conducted 5 in-depth interviews with men who explicitly identified their circumcision as a source of long-term psychological harm. I used interpretive phenomenological analysis, approach that honours the personal, the emotional, and the existential. As you can see, 3 main themes emerge from the data. While each participant had a unique story, the emotional echoes were strikingly similar. The first being that grief disenfranchised. Every man described a profound sense of loss. This proved to be the core theme, but one they felt forbidden to express. And when they tried, they were mocked, dismissed, or simply told to get over it. Their grief was not just ignored, it was ridiculed. This led to a sense of shame, isolation, and an emotional shutdown. They learned early and painfully that their suffering would not be met with empathy. There was also a sense of relationships fractured. Many described lasting damage to their relationships with parents, particularly where consent had been given on their behalf. Some felt betrayed. Others described ruptured trust in medical systems. Intimate relationships were often shadowed by anxiety, embarrassment, or sexual pain. Emotional legacies that stretched far beyond childhood. There was a permanent psychological shift. Participants spoke of a deep rupture in their sense of bodily autonomy. Some described feeling violated. Others experienced long-term symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. For all of them, circumcision was not a moment in time. It was a permanent psychological event, one that shaped how they saw themselves, their bodies, and their place in the world. So why does this matter for us as clinicians, as researchers, as people who care about mental health? Because right now, these men are not being heard. The frameworks we use to assess trauma often don't include their experience. The cultural scripts we've inherited dismiss their suffering before we've even asked what it feels like. And when they do find the courage to speak, they're often met not with empathy, but with invalidation. This is not just a clinical oversight, it's a form of structural inequality in psychological care. Therapeutic spaces must be safe enough to hold stories that challenge our cultural assumptions. We don't have to agree with the client's narrative in order to validate their pain. What we must do is listen without judgment, without defensiveness, without asking them to first justify the legitimacy of their grief. As practitioners, we must acknowledge these sufferings and create a validating, non judgmental space that does not minimize lived experience. This research does not ask you to take a political position on circumcision. It asks you to take a human one, to understand that grief can be invisible and that silence is not the absence of pain, but often its companion. To recognise that if we truly want to offer trauma-informed care, we must be willing to acknowledge all trauma, even the kind that society prefers to ignore. For circumcision survivors, the wound is not just physical, it's existential. And the silence that surrounds it deepens the hurt. It's time we make space for this grief. It's time we offer support, not suspicion. It's time we say you are seen, your pain matters, and you are not alone. Thank you.